Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Nightllii with Meccavellii. I'm Mecca and we're going to be doing things a bit differently tonight. I'm so excited because I typically like to review TV shows, reality shows, movies, things that I'm watching on the big screen, but something that I also love to do is I love to read things on a little bit smaller, not really a screen, but more like a page, and something I've been looking forward to reading and so anticipating watching this press tour is the Matriarch by none other than Celestine, Beyonce, Knowles, Lawson, all of the names, even though the front just says Tina Knowles. Now, I ordered this book off Amazon, and if you go to the description, it will be there in my Amazon storefront. It is only available in hardcover right now, I believe, and it was about $25. This is the front. Beautiful portrait. This is the back. Beautiful headshot. I thought it would be so fitting that we start this book club episode on the opening night of the Cowboy Carter tour. So shout out to everyone in Cali and LA who is going to be able to see Beyonce tonight. I'm so jelly, but not really, because I'm going to get to see her in both Houston and Atlanta. And instead of doing that, I am going to be reviewing this book. Now, let me tell you, I'm not just gassing this because I love Beyonce. I'm not just gassing this because I love Miss Tina. I had to earn all of my money today. On Mondays, Jamila and I record our podcast, Unhinged and Immoral. In addition to that, I run a medical spa here in Houston, and a plethora of other things that I had to get done for Jamila and I's podcast. So much travel I've been doing. I have my godbrothers graduating high school in a week, and in 2 weeks in Atlanta. I have a cruise I'm leaving for this weekend. I had to pack. I just was preparing for a lot, and still I managed to get through 4 chapters of this book. I started this on my lunch break, really not knowing what to expect, and let me just be transparent, I did not expect to be hooked as quickly as I was, but my God, I'm blown back, and I'm very impressed with the writing in this book. The themes of this book are very much family, very much passing the stories of your elders down to your children, and in the midst of that, finding who you are and where you fit into your ancestry. And I think that those are universal themes that can fit for anyone. But if you are a Black American person, oh my God, I just saw my family in this, in the stories that I'm reading, and the way that this is set up, especially as someone who has older parents. Miss Tina was born in 1954. My father was born in 1950, and my mom was born in 1957. The stories in this story are so akin and in line with the things that my parents have told me, and I'm only 4 chapters in. It's got 11 chapters now. Miss Tina, you know she long-winded, child. You know my girl long-winded. But I'm really excited to read the entire thing because I know it's really gonna resonate. Before we get into it, I think it's important. She has a family tree in here that has been going viral on Twitter. This is what she calls the mother tree, and she has her family. And I know maybe I'll zoom in during the editing process, but this is her family tree. It goes up through her her great-great-grandmother, and she talks about these people. But for the purpose of this story and where it's going to move, I do think it's important that there are some names that I need to name off, because they're going to come up a lot in the first 4 chapters. So of course there's Celestine, Teenie, and Beyonce, aka Tina Knowles. She got 11 siblings, but I'm going to name them off in order. Her mother was married before she got married to her father to a guy named Mervyn Slack Marsh. Please remember that name. And together, Agnes Darion, Beyonce, that is Miss Tina's mama. Agnes and Mervyn have Selena Mae Marsh, Rittenhouse, that was her married name, and John Slack Jr. Mervyn March. So basically, Selena and Slack Jr. are her 2 older siblings from her mama's first marriage. Slack Sr. is her mama's first husband, who is eventually going to go by Big Papa. He remains a family friend, is what I'm trying to say. And then from her parents, Agnes Darion, House of Darion, and Loomis Beyonce, we have Florence Beyonce, Flo. She goes by Flo. We have Ronald Butch Martin Beyonce. We have Lawrence Larry Albert Beyonce. And we have Loomis Skip Joseph Beyonce. So the boys all have a nickname. Everyone in this family has a nickname. So except for Selena really, and Mama Agnes. So you've got Slack Jr., and then the other siblings are Flo, Butch, Larry, and Skip, and Celestine goes by Teeny. Right now, for the first 4 chapters, those are the people that you need to know. Let me pull out my notebook now that we're here, and we're going to start at the prelude, which is called the Pecan Tree. Let me open this up just so I can make sure I'm getting the name right. Prelude, Under the Pecan Tree. Now, the prelude, we are opened up. Miss Tina is 5 years old. They have this huge pecan tree in their yard that they talk about, and I heard Miss Tina say this on the press tour for this. I heard her say it last summer before she started promoting the book, but you could tell, hindsight 2020, she was starting to promote the book, right? Because last summer she told the story about all of her siblings and then her parents have a different spelling of the name Beyonce. So like a couple of the brothers have Beyonce, Angie's daddy has Beyonce, then it's Beyonce, then it's Beyonce. Beyonce spelling is her last name. And that is because in Galveston, they just wrote it how it sounded. And her mother asked after her first child, can you fix it? And the white nurse told them, you should be happy to even have a birth certificate because, you know, just a few years back, black families were not getting birth certificates for their babies. So her mom, not wanting to rock the boat, obviously, in the American Jim Crow segregated South, just let it be. And so that's why they all have different spellings of the name Beyonce. And so she asked that's one of the things that she asks underneath the pecan tree. She also asks about her mother's lineage, essentially. And well, she asked, her mom's telling her, and we learn about her mother is Agnes, and Agnes's mother is Odelia. And Odelia is the daughter of a slave master's son and a slave's daughter. Odelia's mother is Big Celestine Josephine Lacey. And her mother is Rosalie. So it starts with Rosalie. Rosalie's a slave. She has a daughter, and when the slave master dies, they had 20-something slaves. They were going to downgrade to 6. She managed not to be sold. Rosalie and Celestine were able to stay together, and Celestine eventually ended up having children by the slave master's son, Eloy. He eventually purchased Odelia and the 2 children that he ended up having with her, and then they proceeded to have 11 other children. Okay, that's just and one of those children is Odelia. Celestine and Eloy have 11 children. I hope I'm saying this right. One of those children is Odelia, and that is Agnes's mother. You following me? You're following me? You're following me? Agnes is Miss Tina's mom, and she talks about having a very big pride in being a black woman because of how much pride her family took in being kept together when they were being sold in and out of slavery. Like, and if again, this will resonate if you're a descendant of black American slaves. And so her pride in being black doesn't necessarily come from like a skin tone, because she has an example here when she had a shirt that said something like 100% black, and a black man came up to her and was like, you're not 100% nothing, and she was like, I'm the blackest person you know, da da da. Just very much reminiscent of like, yeah, I'm black. And I mean, I feel her, but I do think that she says she's like that because her mother sat under this pecan tree and fed her entire family history, and she kind of hammers home the importance of the oral aspect of our culture, and the oral aspect of passing our stories down and remembering stories to pass down and stepping up, and what being a matriarch of a family is. So that's really what the prelude is about. And then we get to the first chapter, called Badass Teeny B. Now, badass, you can put it together. Teeny stands for Celestine teen, and B stands for Beyonce. She describes growing up in Galveston, right, which is a port city here outside of Houston. Typically, when you want to go to the water or have a beach life experience, you go to either Galveston or Las Padres. I can't really think of the other city that we go to. I actually spend a lot of time in Galveston. So I feel like a fly just flew by, but I'm trying to see them dust or a fly. I don't know what the fuck that was. I've actually spent a lot of time in Galveston, so I feel like reading this, I was like, oh my god, I'm familiar with the places that she's saying. But she talks about being 5 and how when you're a kid, your world is so small. Like, the world is so big, but your world consists of like these 4 corners. And so she has her house, and then she has her big sister Selena's house, who at the point in which she's, oh, it is a fly. It is a fly. It is a fly. If I kill that fly during this broadcast, y'all just know it is a fly. She has her older sister Selena, who at this point is 27 and has 51 kids of her own. Just know that. And she describes her world being her house, Selena's house, the beach, and then the Catholic school, that the Rosary. Hold up, what's the name of the school? Child, I don't even know the name of the school. We're gonna get to that chapter 4. And the Catholic school that they all go to. So we learn early on that Agnes is a very worrisome woman. She is filled with so much anxiety. And there's a point in time where Tina cannot understand why her mom is filled with all this anxiety. She doesn't understand, but she just knows her mother is very worrisome and she's sickly. And 2 things are for sure. She's going to worry, and she's going to go to the hospital at least 2 times a year for these ailments. And her older sister Selena, who she loves so much. She's 27 with 8 kids. She's tough, but she's funny. But you gotta be when you're 27 with 8 kids. And she has another older sister named Flo, who's about 15, who she shares a birthday with. Her and Flo share a birthday. And Flo is quoted, she says, Flo always said, you came in and you ruined my life, because her birthday was canceled. Obviously, her mother went into labor, so they had to cancel her birthday party. Obviously, if Flo's 15, Tina's 5. Flo's 10th birthday party had to be canceled because her mom went into labor with the little sister. And so there is this bit of tension between Flo and Tina that is going to persist, at least for the 4 chapters that I read. They name off Flo's 50-11 kids. They name off Selena's 50-11 kids, but all you need to know for the purposes of this chapter and the future chapters is that one of Selena's sons' name is Johnny. I bet you're putting 2 and 2 together right now, and we know who the hell that is. Uncle Johnny made my dress, you bitches. That she's fat, that she looks a mess. Okay. And Johnny and Teeny are best friends. They are best cousins. If you come from a family and you have a best cousin, I had a best cousin growing up, so that was already something that was like, oh my god, I totally understand this, being like having a best cousin. Agnes, her mama, says that if Johnny farts, Teeny catches it. And it's also important to note that Johnny is 4 years older than Celestine Teen. So at this point, she is 5 and Johnny is 9. Now Johnny has always been openly himself, that's how she puts it, but then she later says she's always known Johnny to be gay. It was never something that was forced to be hidden in their family. And she said that Selena poured so much into all of her children and made them so confident that Johnny never had to hide himself. So you kind of used to him getting weird looks and all these different things. These are details that we know about the family, but it's like you're learning from the beginning stages of what's happening here. Selena and Agnes, so Selena, her older sister, and her mother are both seamstress, and these are more details that are going to come important. They're going to become important if you know the history in terms of Miss Tina. Oh my god, all these damn names. Miss Tina designed and made all the dresses for the Destiny's Child. And so when you learn that her mother was this badass seamstress, her mother was the best seamstress in Galveston, and then her older sister was also an excellent seamstress. So they were known for being, they didn't have a lot of money, but they were known for being incredibly well dressed because her mother and her older sister were so good at sewing. A lot of things start to make sense about the information that we already have about the family. Let me see. She discusses how her mother's house was the epicenter of the neighborhood because her mother was so worrisome that she wanted all the children, all of her children and all of her grandchildren to be in her yard. We will later find out why her mom is so worrisome all the damn time, but right now you're just you have this feeling that her mom is always stressed. And again, if you have a lick of sense, this is the American South in the 1950s during segregation and Jim Crow. This is before the Civil Rights Movement and the height of the KKK. So a black woman with 50-11 black children and black grandchildren, because you know she got 50-11 kids, her oldest daughter got 50-11 kids, the bunch of these motherfucking kids walking running around. Yeah, I want y'all at Big Mama house, Big Agnes house. Y'all need to stay right here. And so that completely makes sense. She tells a story about they had like a stamp system, kind of like, I don't know, like, did y'all ever have the penny saver? Like, where people would have these stamps, and so they ran like this little grift, this little scheme where they would stand outside the grocery stores and like, oh, can we have your stamps? Can we have some stamps? And people would give them the stamps. And so typically at this grocery store, people will often like cash them in for little things like appliances and food and all this stuff, but there's always bigger prizes, right? And so because there were so many of them, they would get all these stamps, and her mom would save up all these stamps to get big prizes. And so things she won with the stamps was like a whole entire swing set, a backgammon table, croquette. And she talks about how having a swing set in such a poor neighborhood at the time was kind of revolutionary. Like, all the children congregated here because this is like, think about it, this is a poor neighborhood. They don't have parks and shit. There's just this swing set that they saved up with these freaking stamps from the grocery store to get. Like, out of this world. They talk about a neighbor. I didn't write her name down. And Miss Tina describes her. She said she had to have been born a slave. But then she later said she was born in 1870 here in a county that's not too far from Houston, I think it. I can't remember what county she was born. And so she goes on to describe, maybe she wasn't born a slave, but the slaves were freed in 1865. And as we all well know, the reason Juneteenth is a thing is because people here in Texas a year later found out like they were still enslaved and had been free for how motherfucking long. Exactly. Imagine for a young girl growing up in a very rural part of Texas, at what point they even found out, you know, that they were free, how late they found out, and what that looked like. Another titty fix. Hold on. She says how her mother was basically the neighborhood mom. Everyone called her Teeny Mama, like Teeny's mom, but then it became Teeny Mama. You know, my mom was the neighborhood mom. Our house was also the house that everyone came to. So that definitely was also something that resonated with me. And I think that's because my mom was also older. Celestine was a surprise baby. If you peeped what I said, she has 2 older siblings from her mother's first marriage, and she got 50-11 nieces and nephews. Her oldest sister was 27 when she was 5. So her mom had her at 44, as she stated. And so when she talks about her parents being tired and a little bit older, just the experience of having older parents, I see, even though there's things she's not saying, I see that all in her storytelling. Her dad works as a longshoreman. He works specifically on the loading docks because he has a disability. He is blind in one eye and deaf in one ear. And he can only physically manually load crates, and the crates are typically very heavy. The reason they are poor is because the crates are so heavy that he can't move them as quickly as multiple men can move them. So if it was multiple men moving like something that might take, I don't know how she explained it, more so like a week for most men or whatever how she said it. What he was doing, it took him 5 weeks. So he would get like, the most men were getting 1 week's pay, but that would take him 5 weeks to make by doing the loading docks. Because of his disability, he couldn't do like the regular longshoreman job. And you'll find out later, we're going to talk about how he ended up getting the job that he did. That doesn't require him to have the clearances that the average longshoreman has. But he also was a barber on the weekends, and she mentions how her daddy likes to drink. It's Monday through Friday, she alludes to him being sober, Monday through Thursday, she alludes to him being sober. Friday through Saturday, though, child, he was throwing that liquor back. He was getting fucked up. And she talks about it being an argument with her and her parents sometimes, most of the time. She does also talk about having, she's not really aware of segregation and racism. She talks about how her brothers were shot at by white teenagers with BB guns, and the way that BB pellets embed themselves in the skin, they had to go to the hospital and get them actually removed. And that kind of sets up, you know, she set it up so her mother is explaining her constant worry over her children, and then we get these little pieces as to, she's 5 years old, so she's not seeing that's why her mom is so worried. But we as the reader and as adults and as people who have knowledge on, you know, racism in the South, we can put two and two together. The beach where they go in Galveston is segregated, and so the teenagers were basically, they had to walk through kind of a whites only area to even get to the segregated part of the beach, which is a mind fuck. And so on that walk, that's where the teenagers were shooting them with BB pellets. So chapter 2 is called Galveston. Oh, and chapter 1, it takes place during a span of time. So Badass Teeny B takes place in June of 1959. Chapter 2, Galveston, takes place in July of 1959. She talks a lot about Galveston here, and more so the history of Galveston. At one point in time, it was one of the biggest ports in the United States of America. It was also one of the biggest slave ports. So if you have an idea of Galveston, I'm actually going on a cruise, but typically I'm flying out of Miami this time, but typically I leave out of Galveston's ports. And when you're driving into Galveston, you can still see these very, very huge ports. So it's not a stretch to imagine one point this being the epicenter of trade in the United States, or one of the epicenters. And to give you an example of that, Galveston was the first city in Texas with a bank. It was the first city in Texas with a post office. It was the first city in Texas with not only electricity in the homes, but telephones in the homes. That's to give you an idea of how thriving of a metropolis that this small beach town was. And it was also an area where black business was allowed to thrive, because there's so much money coming in with trade and everything that even the black people in Galveston were able to thrive. There is a black business center, she describes, in Galveston, a black business district, and they had stores and restaurants. They had their own movie theater, and she talks about when friends and family from Louisiana and deeper in the South would come and visit, they would always be so shaken at like all this opportunity. They would always be so shaken at like, sorry, I'm like another fly. They would always be so shaken at all this opportunity that Galveston had for black people, and all these activities that Galveston had for black people. But the hurricane of 1900 changed all that. Thousands of people died in Galveston. That's a big historical event that we learn about here in the U.S., especially in school. And after that, it kind of changed the flow of the city. It became more of a party city, gambling city. And she said it was Vegas before Vegas. But she said one thing they always, it was Vegas. So then we start to learn, she starts to talk about her sister Flo, and how Flo is 15 and she's getting really, really into fashion. And she ran away from home at one point in time, because since the mama was a seamstress, she was so big on dressing. Flo definitely gives off the rebellious older sister who doesn't want to be bothered with her little sister. And she has to be able to take Teeny out. Now, this is going to be set up for the next chapter. Whenever Flo wants to go to downtown Galveston, she has to take Celeste and Teen with her, like as, you know, like a babysitter. You can't get into that much trouble if you have a 5-year-old with you. And they go to the bus station, they go and do all this stuff. We also learned that down by the business center, or I believe that's how it's set up, by the black district in the black part of town, they have built a brand new projects. Now, Celeste and Teeny's dad does not want to live in the projects because he sees it as a cycle of poverty being created by the government. Conspiracy theory before conspiracy theory, but he's not wrong. And she says, you know, my dad was feeding into respectability politics. That's how he felt. He felt that if we had a house, we were just in a better way, even though they were very poor and their house was old and these projects were new. He didn't want to fall into that trap, but she wanted to live in the projects because she was like, that's where everyone's at. That's where it's popping. That's where it's lively. That chapter was a little short, and I feel like it just more so set us up for, oh, I'm not lying. It's lively. Chapter 2 is the point in which we are. But back to Flo having to take Teenie out whenever she goes out downtown. We are told a story about them trying to get on the bus. And they've had a wonderful day outside, out home. They've ate, they've walked around, they've done all the things. And it's time to go back home. And they walk past the front of the bus. And there's one lone white woman sitting in the front of the bus. Now you have to remember, this is 1959. This is years before Rosa Parks does what she does. And Flo guides Celeste and Teenie to the back of the bus where it's crowded. All these black people are sitting. There's standing room only, and she cannot understand why there's all this room in front of the bus. It's just one white woman sitting up there. So she kind of breaks away and she runs away, and she runs to sit on the front of the bus. And Flo was like, "Come back, come back." She's not listening because she's 5 and she doesn't really get it. She's like, "I want to fucking sit down." And so Flo yanks her, and the white woman says, "You better not do that. If her parents knew you were doing that, they'd ring you up." Because we then find out that Flo is a brown-skinned girl, and she does not look like Miss Tina. And the woman thinks Miss Tina is a little white girl. And she said, if her mother finds out you do that, da da da. So she basically says, her mama is my mama, da da da. So she drags her by the hair to the back of the bus. And even then, she doesn't really understand why that happened. She just knows that she's made Flo mad. And we're going to hold on to that until chapter 3 when we get to Weeks Island. Now, Weeks Island, that takes place in August of 1959. This is chapter 3 of the book. And Weeks Island is the island in Louisiana where her parents are from, where they met, where actually everyone is from. So not only her, but her mother's first husband, because everyone lives in Galveston right now. Just keep that in mind. So we learned that periodically the family drives 6 hours from Galveston to Weeks Island. And she makes a mention that her dad drives straight through, and he always likes to leave after the sun's gone down. And I was like, probably driving straight through because you can't stop in the sun downtown. She didn't say that, but again, knowledge that we have living in the American South in 1959. Flo, and they have this tradition in his family that he doesn't like to tell his brothers he's coming. He just likes to show up at the door. And Flo and both Teenie, even though she's 5, she said she finds this embarrassing. Like, you're supposed to call whenever we get there. Everyone's always asleep. Like, it's like we're surprising them. It's an uncomfortable feeling for them. Now we start to meet new family members here. We meet Lydia, which her name is Lydia, but she has a thick Creole accent, and she says that her Aunt Lydia, who is her mama's sister, actually preferred to speak Creole than to speak English. And then she has her mama's other sister, Mandy. Mandy is messy and funny, and and tells stories in a different way than her mom. Her mom tells stories to teach her lessons. Her mom tells stories to teach her about the family. Mandy tells stories to be messy. And I just know me and Mandy would have gotten along real good. That's my type of auntie. Yeah, give me this. They give an example of Mandy telling her how her parents were shacking up, but that's closer to the end of the chapter. So everyone is from this island, even the first husband. So Mervyn Slack Marsh is Agnes's first husband. They met, they got married, they went to Galveston. It was horrible. Lydia, Slack was not that nice to Miss Agnes. He said she couldn't cook, and he said he felt like, I'm a longshoreman, I'm making money, you can't cook, you can't clean, you can't do a damn thing. And so he asked her sister Lydia to come out and teach her how to do all these things. In the process of that, Lydia met her own boyfriend, and they frolic off into the sunset. At one point, Slack kicks Agnes out after an argument and makes her leave Selena. And she says Selena was about 3 at this point, and she takes her baby, who is Slack Jr. And actually, Slack Jr.'s great-grandson on Twitter quoted it and showed himself. I remember seeing that too. I reposted it as well. And she talks about how Slack didn't let her see Selena for a year, and she went back to Weeks Island, and in that process, she met Loomis Beyonce. That's her Celestine's dad. who apparently had always had an eye for Agnes, even when she was chasing after Slack in the previous years. Now, like anything else, Loomis, and so this is what Auntie Mandy is referring to in terms of them shacking up, because she was technically still married to Slack Sr., but he was in Galveston. He eventually sent Selena back, and so her daddy Loomis starts to, Albert is one of the brothers, I believe, I keep saying that. Loomis starts to raise Selena and Slack Jr. as if they are his own, and then they start having other children eventually. They keep referencing this accident that has caused her dad to be blind in one eye and deaf in one ear. The reason he cannot get work as an average longshoresman, and thus by making an extraordinarily less amount of money than the average longshoreman. But we learned about that accident, and to tell you about that accident, I have to give you a little bit of history of Weeks Island. So Weeks Island was originally a sugar plantation. They were big on their slaves not running away because it's an island. They create all these moats with alligators, all this bullshit. Slavery ends, and it just becomes, indentured servitude against, share and that type of thing. And what they discover is salt mines underneath the island. So it switches up from being a sugar plantation to a salt mining town. And after I think a few generations of the slave owner's family, they sold it to a big company. Now all the black people on this island work in the salt mining town. The salt mining town owns everything. Everyone's houses, the store, the churches, the school, like everything. And if black people wanted to go to school, they had to take a bus 40 miles both ways. Who the fuck was gonna do that? So you started working at the salt mines, especially as a little boy, very young. She talks about how her father started working at 11 or 12 years old because he himself was an orphan, and he was he had to earn his keep with the relatives that he was staying in. Now her daddy has 11 brothers who, again, he seems very close with, who he loves to see, and they embrace him whenever he comes into town. One day her dad was working, and he was the dynamite guy, which is a very dangerous job. An explosion happens, and him and another man are buried under all this rubble. Now it was policy of the salt mine not to go in and save them, essentially. And so all of his brothers, they said he had something like 10 brothers. They're all working this shift. They all know it's blown up. They all know he's under this rubble, and they're begging to go down there and save their brother. And they're like, no, you can't do it. So they wait till the mine closes, and they hop the fence, and they go save their brother. And he's alive, and as is this other man. He's just left miraculously blind in one eye and deaf in one ear. The other man had to get his leg amputated, and at the hospital, as they're waiting for him, they come arrest a few of the older brothers, and they fire all of the brothers, including her dad, who was a victim, and the guy who got his leg amputated, leaving them without work in this town where there are no other jobs, to basically make an example out of them, that you do not go against this company. We run things, big brother above everything else. And so what ends up happening is they're left disgruntled. A couple weeks pass. It's not clear on the time exactly. The mine ends up hiring 5 of the older, more tenured brothers back because they're seeing where their workload is suffering. And so it creates a divide in this family where it's like, well, what the fuck? So then I guess she doesn't say how, but she says a white man from up north, essentially, they got word of this, and he starts talking to the dad about unions. And if you know anything about the 50s and unions and Hoffa and all the things, unions were big. Companies, factories, mines did not want their workers unionizing or having any type of rights. And so they begin to threaten their dad, stop talking, but he has no means of work, no means of surviving. And so he keeps speaking with this union man until one day someone sets their house on fire, and her mom is like, I have to get my kids out of here, we have to go. And so they drive all the way to Galveston, and they go to Ligia's house, and they just was living in a boarding house. She said, I don't have room for you and all these babies, right? And with nowhere else to turn, she goes to Slack's house, her ex-husband, who she ran away from, who treated her very bad, who she actually hated. And Much to her surprise, with her kids and her new husband, Slack says, come in and stay as long as you need to stay. She talks about how she feels Slack was on his redemption tour because he felt like he owed not only her mother but her father, because her father had raised his children, because his children were grown by this point. Again, this is by she's not clear as to if she's been born yet, but his kids are big and grown. Like, Loomis raised his kids, and so it's basically like he's trying to make up for that, so they're even. So, and she talks about how, one, Slack and her daddy look a lot alike. They look like brothers. So Miss Agnes clearly had a type, much like Miss Lindy. She likes them light and bright, damn near white, okay? And two, they became good friends, and it's actually Slack who gets her daddy the job at the dock as a longshoreman. He sticks his neck out and says, hey, I know he can't do this because he's disabled, but he can do that because he's more tenured, and she says he stuck his neck out. And so then we see them moving as a very clear and cohesive blended family. She talks about her mother she hated living with Slack for the couple months that they needed to live with them. And he's married by this time, just keep that in mind. He's remarried, and Miss Tina describes him as a rolling stone. He's been married a couple times, so don't feel too bad. He never got it together in that way. But she hated living with Slack, even though she knew it was a good thing, that he was helping them, because she didn't like living with him the first time. And it just reminded her, it opened up old wounds, which sucks. That sucks. But she says the one good part was that him and your dad got along real well, and they actually became very close friends. So that's the story of the accident and how the family was ran off of Weeks Island and ended up in Galveston, and why coming home they get so happy and they have to have this whole big thing when they're on Weeks Island. But Weeks Island is also very different from Galveston if you're paying attention to what I just described in terms of the fucking segregation, the fucking Big Brother, there's racism on Galveston Island the way Miss Tina experiences, but on Weeks Island it's a bit different, and it finally clicks for her, because even with the bus incident, she says she didn't realize that was racism. She just was like, what the fuck? It's not till she's on Weeks Island that she feels like she is confronted with racism truly for the first time. And she's with her two cousins, she calls them Tall and Small, and they go to a store, and they're about to go in a store and buy food or candy, and white kids run in front of them, and they stand there and have to wait. And she's like, why can't we go in there? Better get some candy. And she's like, we can't go in there while white kids are in there. And so she kind of ignores this, and she opens the door, and the white woman at the counter hisses at her and says, get out! And she's like, what the fuck? And she kind of stands there. She's just so shocked by it that she's, get out of here again, right? Get out of here again. And she's just stressed, and her cousins are like, girl, what the fuck? She over here fucking shit up. And when they get back to the house, she basically says, they tell Aunt, I think she said these are Aunt Mandy's kids, Messy Mandy, these are her daughters. She says, Teeny can't come with us nowhere, she'll not be taking an egg. And her mama takes their side. She says, you can't come in here messing shit up for them. And she was, and again, we get another piece of her mother's anxiety making sense. She gives her a talk about, that you can't do this. You can't just run around like this. And she also makes sure to mention, this is 3 years post Emmett Till. If you're not familiar with the story of Emmett Till, he was a boy who was from Chicago, went to Mississippi, allegedly whistled at a white woman. It's been on her deathbed, she said that he didn't, and he was lynched by the Ku Klux Klan. They cut off his penis, they put it in his mouth, they did atrocities to his body. His mother gave him an open casket funeral because she said she wanted the world to see what the Klan had did to her boy. And that was one of the first times that across America it was seen, like the KKK was kind of like this dirty secret. People knew about it, but they broadcasted it. And so black people across everywhere were seeing like, oh my God, we knew this. And it's like, we knew it, but we never spoke it. And the unspoken, don't ask, don't tell. And so you're 3 years post Emmett Till, and you're in a place that's very much like going from Chicago to Mississippi, which I hate to plug Sinners, but that's the exact plot, right? And what did Smoke and Stack say? Chicago just Mississippi with big buildings, with tall buildings, but it is the way it ran is a little bit different. And so she was like, you can't come and fuck their shit up. And she talked about how her cousins were so trained to racism, and she didn't feel like she was trained in the same way. But then she started to think about it. She was like, actually, I am trained to racism. And all the little things, like the bus incident, like her brother's getting shot up, like all, like she said, having to move. Hey guys, my other camera died. So we're gonna keep on going. I'm gonna try and, I'm on my Digi Osmo. This is my vlogging camera, and my shit fucking died. So we're gonna keep going here because I really want to get through this and I want to put this out tonight. But anyway, she talks about how all these pieces just begin to make sense about racism for her. And again, this is another block and puzzle piece in us understanding the anxiety that her mother feels constantly. And she said for the first time in her life, she began to feel it too. And again, as a Black American, that just literally resonates. Like, you're like, I get it. Like, I think we can all really pull back and kind of think about the first time that we conceptualized racism. But this chapter does end on a better note. It ends with messy Aunt Mandy telling us the story about how her parents were shacking up before Slack had granted her mama a divorce. And she says that's the first time she heard the term shacking up. And honestly, I can remember the first time I heard the term shacking up. It's a messy term. And she was saying how Mandy was saying her mama and her daddy used to sing. I think she said the name of the club was the Canteen. But basically her mom and dad used to have an act and sing at this Canteen club. And she talks about how she always knew her mama could sing because she would hear her humming around the house and singing in church, but she never knew her daddy could sing. And she said, yeah, your daddy, Mandy said, yeah, your daddy can sing really good. And that's how the chapter ends. She says, your daddy and your mama can sing, and they were really good. Their performance, their act was really good. And so that kind of sets us up for, again, information that we already know about the family. Fucking Beyonce, fucking Solange. So they got that musical inclination from her parents. They had a whole act. Who would have thought, you know? And so we go to chapter 4, which is, I didn't write it down. Chapter 4 is called Holy Rosary, and that's the school across the street. This fly, I'm gonna get you. Yeah, you're gonna drown. I'm sorry, I had to spray that fly. I had to spray it with some rosemary, and I can just wipe it up later. So Holy Rosary is the Catholic school attached to the church that they live directly across the street from. And the thing is, it is the first Catholic school for Black American children in Texas. I think in the country, but don't quote me on that. But she for sure said Texas. And again, it's a private school. We already know that Miss Tina and her family is extremely poor, but we're gonna get to that. So Sister Fidelis is an old bitch nun. She seems like an old bitch. Let me be real, just an old bitch. She's not a nice lady. And she's a nun. She seems to be like one of the head nuns at this very affluent Black school. Teeny Rose describes the children of the people who go to her school. Their parents are school teachers and nurses and all these different things. She describes them as the Black middle class in Galveston. And she talks about how Sister Fidelis always singles her out and another boy whose father happens to be a barber. Now that's important because, again, we know that Tina's dad is also a barber on the weekends, but it's a signal that her and the other working class kid have been labeled as bad, that when it seems children across the board are just being kids, Sister Fidelis labels them and singles them out. Now we are introduced to Sister Fidelis during the ruler story. She looks all cute. It's her first day at kindergarten. Again, keep in mind, she's 5 years old. And on the very first day at school, someone was talking, and Sister Fidelis said, who the fuck? Oh my God, she's a nun. She says, who was talking? And It wasn't. So she said I wasn't talking, so I didn't think of anything of it. But this boy pointed at her, so she pointed back, like just reflex. And so they both got called to the class. And again, this is September of 1959. What happens? They both get slapped in the hand with the ruler, and it's very hard. And because they live right across the street, after she gets her whackings, she runs home and she's like, "What the fuck, Mom? Like, this lady just fucking beat me." And she said she had never been hit by her parents before. Her parents were very much, again, older parents. They're fucking tired. They don't have time to chase around. That beating kids is the vigor. Whoopings come from the vigor of being young. When you got old parents, they let you learn. They let you learn your lessons from falling on your ass, from burning yourself. And that's kind of how she said her parenting style was. And so her mom's like, "No, you have to go back home." And so this kind of became a pattern. They realized that she wasn't the type of child who was going to take, like, they couldn't just hit her. But she said Sister Fidelis got very creative with her punishments, and when she would single her out. And she would always run home. And it got to the point where her mom would stop closing the door, and she was like, "Do you even love me?" Because it's like, this lady clearly hates me, and I hate her, and so what the fuck, Mom? So we learn about that. And then we learn about her mother is a devout Catholic. Her mother goes to Mass every day. Again, this church is right across the street from their house. So bright and early at 7 a.m., her mother goes to Mass. And then on Sundays, the entire family goes to Mass. And she says her family takes up 3 rows. It's always her people. It's her and her brothers and her mom and dad. Then you have by this time they're calling Slack Senior Big Papa, because he's also granddad to a whole 11 kids. And then her sister Selena and her entire clan of people. And so her whole family goes to this church. They take up a good chunk of church. They're a good chunk of the students at the school as well. And so she noticed when everyone does communion, everyone goes up except for her mother. And so one day, Teeny says, "Mom, you can go up," because she's thinking her mom is sitting there with her, because kids, they said, I'm not Catholic, so I don't know, but in the book it said you have to be at least 8 or 9 around there to do communion. So it was always just her mom and her sitting when it was time to go up. And she was like, "Mom, you can go. I'm going to sit here. I'm not going to run away." Her mom's like, I'm good. And she's like, "No, why can't you? You can go." And she's like, "No, I can't." And so she's wondering why, and she goes back home, and she asks her mom, "Why can't you do communion? You're a devout Catholic." And it's like, you would think at 5, why would you be wondering so many things? But it's also like, no, kid, it's like, this is such a part of our routine that why aren't you doing it? And in a way, she says in the book, in a way that's age appropriate, she tells her it's because she's been divorced. Well, Miss Tina's smart enough to know that doesn't make sense, because both Big Papa, Slack Senior, and her daddy do communion. She makes a comment about her daddy can cuss like a sailor and always smelled like liquor because he would be turned up the night before. And she said, her daddy wasn't harming nobody. Her daddy was a good man, but her mama was this devout Catholic. Her sisters called her Saint Agnes. Her mom was known for being the mother of the kids in the neighborhood, for being a good person, and she couldn't do communion, but they let the men do it. And I think that, she doesn't say it, but I think that was her first run-in with the hypocrisy that religion can introduce to us a lot of times. Now back to Sister Fidel bitch ass. I tell you that story first because and I skipped over this. I should have said that. I should have said this before I told the story of why her mother wasn't taking communion. At one point, Sister Fidel told a 5-year-old, "If only you knew, you don't belong here." Now, what the fuck old ass, grown ass, tired ass bitch tells a 5-year-old that? Who fucking knows? A weird ass bitch. But Sister Fidel told Miss Teeny that. And so she remembered she said that, and she was like, "Oh, you don't belong here." But past that, her parents were basically indentured servants to the church. And so in order for all these children to be because you got to include Selena's kids and her brothers and her to go to this private affluent school that they did not have the money to afford, her mother was sewing all the nuns' costumes. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to do disrespect. All the nuns' outfits. Her dad was being chauffeured to the nuns. Her brothers and her nieces and nephews would pick up asphalt and clear the yard of the church. They did whatever the church needed. And that's another way that Christianity gets a lot of people. You have to volunteer, right? But it says a lot about her parents that they were willing to do this. And she says this in the book, that they were willing to sacrifice so much so that their children, their grandchildren could have a good education. We're going to end on this part, and this is a story. There's a situation at this school called the Blessed Virgin Mary, and it's something she says they do once a week, and it's where they sing a song having to do with Mary, and they have a flower crown, and a little girl wearing a white dress, one of the little girls at the school, gets to carry the flower crown and crown the Blessed Virgin Mary. It sounds like something having to do with a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of eyes on you, a lot of attention. And so Celeste and Tina being, known as being badass Teeny B, it's not something that she expects, but she finally got her turn. They finally asked her, hey, do you want to do this? She's like, hell yeah. And so her mom is so excited as well, because she's like, oh my God, you finally get to do the Blessed Virgin Mary. And so her mom, being this badass seamstress, sews this entire dress. And she spends a week putting all these beads, and that's what I didn't mention this, but she talks about her mother's specialty was beading and putting intricate designs on dresses, and it's so beautiful. And so Miss Fidel, bitch ass, it comes Friday when she's supposed to do it, and she says, where's your white dress? And she says, it's right here. And she's like, give it to Linda, she's gonna do it. Now, when you find out why they want Linda to do it, it makes sense. But bitch ass Sister Fidelis, whatever the fuck the bitch name is, the way she went about it was all wrong. We found out that Linda's mom had suddenly died in this time between the last Blessed Virgin Mary, in Teeny's week, basically. She was not at school, then she was at school, and now she's back at school. And so this is a way to help her feel better. But instead of explaining that to Celeste and Teen, they just take her dress that her mama made her and give it to Linda and let her do the Blessed Virgin Mary. And she talks about how, I don't want to give her my dress. And bitch ass Sister Fidelis tells her she has a bad spirit. She calls her a mean little girl. And she basically like says a lot of mean things to a 5-year-old. Like, why would a 5-year-old who's never experienced death understand death? That these are things you have to explain to children, right? Because all you're doing is taking a dress that she watched her mama work very hard on to make for her, and you're taking it and giving to someone else. Yeah, I don't want you to do that either. I'm sorry. Like, what the fuck? But when she goes home, and she's like, I don't want to give my dress to her, her mom explains it to her in a way that makes her understand. She said, well, I can make you another dress, and another dress, another dress, but she doesn't have a mom anymore, and so sometimes you have to give things up to make people feel better. And she did not understand it in that moment. She was still very upset. It wasn't until she saw Linda, who had been upset and sad all week, obviously she just lost her mama, smile and kind of be excited, that she was like, oh, the Grinch's heart has grown. What is this feeling in me that I'm feeling? Like, is this joy of giving things up so that others can have a better life? Like, this feels good. This makes me feel good. And she says that's the first time she felt that, and obviously that's going to be a theme here in the Matriarch. So that's the first 4 chapters of the Matriarch. Stay tuned. We will later this week be getting into some more chapters. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next video.